All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Geopolitical Trends, where truth matters. Excited to be with you. Hope you have or you had rather a quiet, peaceful, enjoyable weekends, and you are rolling with the new week. So, anyway, very excited. I have an interesting topic to talk to you about. This one has to do with the recent. Let me silence the computer here so I won't get bothered. Recent U.S. Iran talks that took place in Rome, Italy, this past weekend. So I was following that closely, read whatever I needed to read, all the white papers, the analysis coming out of the meeting, and so forth. And I decided to do a video for you. The reason being because there is a lot of information out there that is kind of, uh, I won't say misinformation. It just they are not putting things in a proper context. And this is the reason why I wanted to, like I always say, my responsibility not only to provide you an objective assessment of my own analysis, but also to protect the community from. So you can listen to whatever you want, read whatever you want. Just be aware of what you are consuming. And this is what I'm going to be talking to you about. So it's going to be a lengthy one. So get yourself a cup of tea, cup of coffee, popcorn, whatever you do. And let's enjoy this one here. So well, first, let me say hi quickly to our wonderful community. As always, Lee Yang, good to see you. Truth Seeker, Tom Saya Wires, Matt Becky, as always. Hanging G, as always, and thank you for your comments, Hanging G. Lee Yang, good to see you. YT, as always. Willie Holman, Thunderbolt, good to see you. Thunderbolt Designs. Alistalokin, good to see you. Famida, here you are. Rose, good to see you. Timeline Dunkley, Francis Tango, Celu, A. There is this one right here. That's all it says right there. A. Good to see you. Laval, good to see you. And Ping Yu, good to see you here. Some. All right, guys, let me get it because I got a lot to cover. So I want to start with some housekeeping stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed both my conversations with Einar Tengen, of course, a dear friend of mine, and Dr. Warwick Pao, also a dear friend. Also, hope you enjoyed the conversation. Now, speaking of this too, I am going to be coordinating with them down the road, and I'm going to be having them on the channel on a monthly basis. Would you guys like to have that? You know, those are not your average people, intellectually speaking. So this is something you learn from. So I'm going to coordinate with them and see what their schedule looks like, and we'll go from there. And speaking of a monthly conversation, be on the lookout for my upcoming conversation with Carl Za. Of course, once a month we do this. And as to Garland and Brian, I am reaching out to, already reached out to Garland. We're waiting to hear from Brian. Because I promised to host the next roundtable talks. So we're waiting to hear from Brian, and once that happens, I will do that. So now I want to quickly share with you the survey you guys took part of regarding that was a Hang in G's question, believe it or not. So, and one of the questions was, would you? One of the questions, how many years does it take America to repair the Baltimore Bridge? Now, the Baltimore Bridge, to those who don't know, I used to live in Pennsylvania, so Baltimore was closer to me. I used to go there on the weekends, so I'm very familiar with the bridge. And so the question was, the first question was, or the question rather, will it take 5 years, 10 years, 30 years? And I put another option there as I don't know. So 36% of you put it at a 30 years. That's how long it takes to fix. 29% of you said 10, and 15% said 5. So, but here is the thing I'm going to share with you. Did you guys know the state of Texas, where I live, we just received the report cards for 2025? You know what was our grade? C, regarding the infrastructure. And this specifically has to do with two things: the transit and the water decline, the quality that is. So the American Society of Civil Engineers found a slight improvements in aviation and roads to a degree, but a decline in drinking water, yeah, in America. You believe that? Energy and transit, among other categories. So I was very surprised to see that, and I wanted just to tie it to what Hanging G shared with us now. Now, next thing I want to share with you, and this is literally bothered me because of our community. I'm going to share on the screen. Take a look, guys, here. Here is what this individual wrote about our community. And I guess I won't have it. He said, and I quote, he or she, I don't know, and I quote, your audience seems to be reactionary and ignorant. So I answered back and I said, I respectfully disagree. You cannot paint an entire community with broad brush because you may not like the answer of some. I quite, and this has to do with the survey. Didn't not a survey. I'm sorry. It had to do with the posting that I did about China dumping Boeing. You all remember that one, right? And I shared it with you guys. And apparently, this individual didn't like that one. And I was like, well, that's too bad, because it was official that China now holds Boeing aircraft deliveries altogether, which deals a big blow to the US aviation industry. So for this person to say the whole community is ignorant, I kind of he or she is entitled to express himself. But when you start sort of insulting the community because you didn't like an answer, I'm going to push back against that. So anyway, I just wanted to share. Of course, the person is welcome to our community if he or she has something positive to contribute. So anyway, let's move on, guys. Let's move on to our headlines. I have a few headlines, then I'll move on into my analysis. So, well, the first one I'm going to share with you is that right here is that dozen of organizations and unions around the world, have called now on the global shipping company Maersk. You guys familiar with this company? I'm going to put a link here for you. And let me share something. Give credit to the Associated Press for this picture. So take a look here, guys. This is Maersk. Why is this? It's because the company, the reason why the demonstrations by the organizations and so forth calling for the halt, because Maersk has been involved in transporting parts of the F-35 aircraft components to Israel and any other military material used in the war in Gaza. So, and of course, in response, Maersk's line was transporting military shipments to Israel. So the company denied and denied to Al Jazeera, believe it or not. So that is described it as allegations. What do you guys think? So Maersk is not involved just in commodities, transporting of commodities. Second one is, this one has to do with the China Southern CZ. And this is a plane from China. I think I flew on this one from Shanghai to Guangzhou. I bet you, because it was with the China Southern Airlines. So I remember this one. So here's the thing: 10 Boeing 787 aircraft. So these planes handle critical network routes. This is like for the Chinese, and now selling them as originally intended will have necessitated funding brand new aircrafts. Those are the one that Chinese now developing on their own. So what you're looking at, it's the Chinese now. This is why they want to head and dump the Boeing stuff. So just I want you to be aware of that. And the last thing I'll share with you is that on April 18th, which was over the weekend on Friday, the Houthis downed another, sorry for this one right here, down another MQ-9, and I give credit to Anadolu Agency for this picture right here, guys. Yeah, so the Houthis have shut down another one. This is the fifth. So since the US began its military campaign in March 15th. So, and of course now the total will reach about 20. And those planes, those drones are very, very sort of advanced, and yet the Houthis were able to down them. Makes you just wonder, do they have something special that we are not aware of? So Anyway, let's get into our topic here. And this one, I'm going to start with a picture here for the I'm sorry, the Houthis. I give it to Anadolu agency. This is the talks between Iran and this is Italian delegation, not the Americans. Do not get confused, guys. They still, Iranians decided that the talks will be indirect. And I'm going to get into the analysis why the US wants to push the talks to move from Muscat, which is the capital of Oman, into a European city. The Americans are flip-flopping here. We all know what it means. So Ali Khamenei is saying, no, 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 no. We're going to keep the talks indirect till further notice. And this is why now, the logical question that comes after this we need to ask is where these talks are headed. There is optimism and there is pessimism. So, and I let you reach your own towards the end once I give you my own, or share with you rather, my own analysis based on the facts. And I'm going to be sharing also some excerpts with you from my book because it pertains to what's going on. Then you reach your own conclusion for that. However, for me personally, I started with one specific question. Is a war coming to Iran? Given where the talks are headed, there is no. Media is saying, oh, the talks are constructive and all that. I don't buy that personally. The other argument to this for my question, whether is a war coming to Iran, because it is only within a week Iran will have the capability of developing a nuclear weapon. And this is based on even Mr. Trump himself. That is why he's arguing for an agreement with Iran, not a war with Iran. I bet you Mr. Trump understands the ramification of a war with Iran. First of all, we won't be able to defeat Iran. I'll tell you this straightforward. Despite the aircrafts and all, ain't gonna cut it. Because what Iran has in store for this. Second thing is that Mr. Trump is realizing possibility make more sense to cut a deal than to get involved in a war. And the reason also, for me personally, why he's leaning more towards this is because this all came aimed at the estimates that Tehran could produce enough amount of enriched uranium needed to build a bomb in less than 1 week. I still believe Iran's mistake is that they didn't move forward with all this from the get-go because they left themselves vulnerable. And I always give the case of North Korea. They're the United States to threaten North Korea. And this is where I'm going to be starting to think in terms, is Iran in a better position? Is Iran in a stronger position to negotiate now the nuclear agreement? So it's now the second round just took place in Italy, as you know, in Rome on Saturday. There is an upcoming one. I think they're going to now move into the technical aspects of it. So, but you need to understand what took place behind the scenes prior to that particular meeting. And I'll get into all this as I move forward into this. So now you think about the, if we are to think about the technical talks, because that's what's going to have to be next. So both parties, the Americans and the Iranians, will have to allocate technical individuals because this is not for diplomacy. This has nothing to do. It has to do with the technical aspects. So, and these talks might end up taking place back in Oman. I know I read one article and they misspelled the word Oman by spelling it with an A, M-M-A-N, which is Amman is the capital of Jordan. This has nothing to do with that. So. And this is where you will think that for Iran, it's going to be specifically ensuring that the talks are limited to the nuclear program, no more, no less. There is another aspect which has to do with the lifting of sanctions. So, and the problem the US has with this is that the US is concerned with other stuff. And the other stuff, meaning that the regional influence of Iran, the missile capabilities, and the halting of all nuclear activities, including for civilian purposes, which is, in my opinion, is a red line for Iran. And second, this is not a concern of the United States, it's a concern of Israel. So we are the bidding for Israel, because that's what it's all about. What's at the heart of it? What's at the heart of it is we wanted only one entity in West Asia or Middle East to possess nuclear weapon. Can anybody tell me which country is that? Let me see in the chat box. And once again, guys, just to engage you in the conversation, no more, no less. Let me see what your answer is. Sorry, right here. Let me. You got it first. All the way through. You got it. It's Israel. YT, you got it. You guys got it. Francis Tango, you got it. And that's exactly the point for why all of a sudden we are shifting the goalposts to a different. It's like, hold on a second. You can't change horses in the middle of the race. And that's, again, falls back to my original point way back, and I remember mentioning this. Iran will not trust the Americans. American government, that is, not the people. People are separate from all this. So, and this is why you have two red lines, one for each, one for Iran and one for the United States. So for Iran, as I mentioned earlier, to them, the conversation will only be limited to two main points. One of them is the nuclear program, and the other one is the lifting of sanctions. That's about it. So for the United States to be talking about wants to include Iran's missile capabilities, the halting of all its nuclear activities, no, that's a red line for Iran. For the United States, the red line is they wanted to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear bomb. Of course, Iran denies any intentions of acquiring a nuclear bomb. Maybe that's the mistake of Iran, in my opinion, because if Iran should have come forward, and again, I am leaning more towards saying Iran has the wild card, it's just not playing it right now. For whatever reason, this is how I'm reading it. But on the other hand, if they would have come forward and said, we have developed the bomb, and should you dare to threaten us, whatever, you will see a reversal in how we will be dealing with Iran. The same argument I made about North Korea, same arguments about Pakistan, or even India for that matter. So to the US, that is the red line, because now we seems to be moving in a different direction altogether. So, and that's how I see it moving forward. By the way, guys, if you're liking this video, don't just be a viewer or a watcher here. So go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. I will greatly appreciate it. And also don't forget to hit the notification button. So this way, just tap the bell. So this way you will be notified every time I upload a new video or I'll do a live stream. So, and this way you will be supporting the channel that stands for the truth, and you know that. So the choice is yours, and I'm very, very grateful to you for that. So it is. I'm gonna put the link for those who might be here for the first time joining us. That's the, if you want to subscribe there. So now you think about what do Iranians now do? Iran, or does Iran, does Iran have now any fear moving forward after the talks in Rome? And that is not an easy question for us to answer. This is not a yes or no question. It's not. It's because when you consider the conversation that took place the week before in Muscat, which is the capital of Oman, versus the one that took place in Rome, The one back in Muscat were categorized as, and I put this in quote, positive and constructive. End of quote. Yeah, of course, it was the first time. So, however, when you think about the location of the second round, that's when it sparked a dispute. Because why? Is now quickly revealing the discrepancy that Tehran has attributed to contradictory and conflicting positions on part of the United States. So, what is important about this? And here it is. There was, after the talks, some indications emerged that now moving forward, the talks might end up being held in a European country. Of course, the Iranians said, hold on a second. Who are you to decide unilaterally where the next talks is going to be? That's one. Second, what that signals. Because we need to understand, and here is the thing, guys, if the talks are held in Europe, we have influence over Europe. Look at what's going on with the Ukraine conflict. Look how we subdue all the Europeans, no exception. Hungary to a degree, but even Hungary ended up not standing by on the right side of history when it allowed the plane of the Prime Minister of Israel, who is wanted by the ICC, to land without issuing an arrest. And that tells me right there, Mr. Orban is also playing both sides. So, but to be fair, we gotta be fair where fairness is due, or give credit where credit is due. So if the talks are in Europe, we will influence that directions. However, Iranians are saying no. The agreement was made that Oman will be hosting the talks, and we're gonna stick to that. So, and this is why Oman, the capital of Muscat, the capital of Oman, announced on Thursday, which was the 16 or 17, that, by the way, the next talks, and next round of talks is not going to be in Muscat, is going to be in Rome. So, and that makes you just wonder what's going on with that. So, and this is why sort of Washington now is staying silent on the location of the. Actually, Washington didn't disclose the talks about the second round that will be in Rome, only because the vice president flew to Italy on Friday, the day before the talk. Read between the lines, guys. Read between the lines. But again, when you see this behavior, if you are on the Iranian side, you will be asking yourself, why the contradictory? This is not a good sign, because this is the inconsistency of the American possessions. So, and this is, again, you start to think, you think about the diversion. This to me is an indication of the divergent possessions of the US, which means it has no intentions of moving honestly negotiating. And we all know how it is with the American government. Simple as that. So, because here is the thing, and I had a chance to read the statement issued by the Iranian foreign ministry spokesperson. His name is Ismail Baqi. I looked at a picture of his. He's the foreign. Ismail Baqi. Here it is. That's a picture of his right here. So I had a chance to read his statements that's released from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I quote here because I found it very specific. Here is what he wrote. Such behavior, meaning that the United States flip-flopping on the location, such behavior could be interpreted as an indication of lack of seriousness and good faith. He added, we are still in the testing phase, end of quote, which means they're just testing each other's accuracy, seriousness, intentions, and so forth. And this is where, and I couldn't agree more with him when he gave the analogy in soccer, in football. not American football, but even for us, American football, if you change the goalposts, that becomes a problem. And here is what he wrote, a very, very measured. In football, changing the goalpost is a professional error and an unfair act. This is what Baki wrote in a post on X, Twitter, that is, on Wednesday. He wrote, and I quote, in a diplomacy, adopting such approach, which is promoted by extremists who lack understanding, logic, and national negotiation skills, risk sabotaging in a start. End of quote. He is spot on. We can't be changing the horses in the middle of the race. We agreed that we're going to hold the talks in Oman. Then that's what you keep the talking. You keep the negotiations till either we reach an agreement or we part ways. So, and this is, again, it's because the United States did not like Oman's independence, meaning neutrality. Oman is neutral. It's not a siding with Iran or siding with the Americans. And we didn't like that. So that is one of the problems that the US seems to be having. And moving forward with this, you're going to now to think about regarding these locations, because it's very, very serious. When you start just flipping locations at the whim of your desire, no, it doesn't work that way. Because now this one here shows the lack of trust between both countries, Iran and the Americans. I'm not surprised. I argued this back then, that the Iranians not going to trust the Americans. Yes, they might sit with negotiations, indirect ones. This is the reason why they wanted to hold the talks indirectly. So, and that is, again, why you need to understand why Washington is asking for face-to-face negotiations with Iran. But Iran is refusing, and rightly so. Because here's the thing. If you are to think about why all of a sudden switching from Muscat to Rome, what objective could the Americans have into that? Well, that is a tactic to pressure Iranians. Because here is the thing. If you were able to do this, what you're going to do next? You know, even the possibility that Washington might demand a change of the mediator and or sponsor in the future. You all see where this is going. Because so far, Oman is being neutral. Oman is sitting between the two, of course, in the separate halls, and taking the information from the Iranian side. And so I used to get involved in stuff like this, usually with foreign languages between high-ranking officials from both sides, the US and the whatever country we're dealing with. And of course, my role was to specifically ensure that what this party is saying, it's exactly what this party is hearing. You can't add or deduct or just translate it according to your whim, whatever. No, it doesn't work that way. This is exactly what neutrality is. So, and this is, again, why Iranians are refusing the direct talks with the Americans. So, because the thing is, for the Americans, what they couldn't achieve militarily, they understand. Washington understand that we won't be able to defeat the Iranians. So what we're going to try to do is we're trying to achieve this in a different way. How? By imposing demands on the negotiating table, which would make the opposite view. It moves on an orchestrated of suspicion. This is what I believe why the Americans wants to change the venue of the negotiations. And this is why Americans are pushing quietly. And I want to rule that out. But again, I don't see Iranians agreeing to that, because if they do, then that's it. That's it. Yeah, as the saying goes, you give them an inch, they will take a foot. You give an American an inch, they will take a foot. So, however, the the American government will insist on transferring the negotiations to a European country, because we can control Europe. Europe is useless anyway, and we control it. So the concern or the fear for the United States had is because Oman, Oman is closer proximity to Iran. But even with that, so what? Oman is being neutral. There is no, I don't see any. So, and what comes in all this to highlight to you why we don't even have a strategy? Donald Trump, it just goes with whatever the wind is blowing. That's how it works. And what am I referring to here? I am referring to the leaked documents when Donald Trump sort of thwarting an Israeli plan to strike Iran's nuclear sites in May next month. I don't buy that. I don't buy that, because here is why. Donald Trump will dare to go against Israel. Tell you this straightforward. Could he disclose that to put pressure on Israel to agree to whatever the US will agree with Iran? Maybe, maybe not. But it was Donald Trump who disclosed or thwarted rather the plan that Israel was planning to attack Iran. It's nonsense, first of all, because Israel will not be able to strike on its own. He can't attack Iran on its own. It doesn't have the means to do it. So, and that is why you're going to have to understand the talks that took place in Rome was nothing but just reading between the lines and weighing the options. Because when you weigh the options, you're going to have to decipher facts from fictions. And in negotiations, you're going to have to know the reality from just the hypes, what the Americans are saying versus what is really on the ground. Of course, Iran is aware of all this. Iran is aware of the military buildup in the region. But Iran is also preparing and putting things in place. All the defensive missile systems are in place, by the way. And I'm going to be sharing some pictures with you as I move forward. And this is just in case the path from negotiations divert into a military trajectory. So once again, that's why I asked that question. Is a war coming to Iran? Iran is not scared of it, but also we need to understand the ramifications of this. So, and what triggers all this now is that the tone that took place in Muscat, the capital of Oman, during the first phase, is very different from the tone that took place in Rome. And especially when it comes down to the uranium enrichment. Yeah. And that is, again, where you start to see the divisions that exist, not only within the US, but also between the US and Israel. And I'm going to get into all this as I move forward, because there is one particular thing I need you to know. All this comes on the heels of against the backdrop of three main things. And I'm going to share with you. The first one, it has to do with the Russian factor. This might surprise you to a degree, because here is the thing. While all this happening, there is a question that loomed large. As a geopolitical analyst, you're going to have to think outside the box. And that thinking is pertaining to whether Russia could move away from Iran to get closer to Washington. Because you might think, oh no, that ain't going to happen, whatever. You don't. In geopolitics, it doesn't work that way. It works as far as the strategic interest, the national strategic interest. So, of course, Moscow will always support Iran against the Americans and the European pressure, as long as there are certain conditions met. And I'm going to share just a few with you and move on with that. So think about it. For example, I'll give you a few examples. That the Russians will want to ensure that Iran's negotiations with the Americans do not lead to Tehran distancing itself from Moscow. In other words, that whatever concession the Americans will make will not allure Iranians to this side away from the Russians. That's one. That's how Russians will think, and rightly so. Second example I'll give you. You can consider, as long as the negotiations between the Iranians and the Americans do not lead to an escalation of tensions. Why? Because you are going to be looking at the realignment of interests of the Russians. And the Russians worked very hard to establish their influence in West Asia. The third example I will give you is that as long as this does not negatively impact Russia's partnerships with Arab countries in the region. And the last example I'll give you about this is that Moscow interests are taken into account in any negotiations with the West. So, because you're going to have to consider all this. So, as I mentioned to you earlier, guys, I had a chance to write a book about Iran, to those you all know by now. And I told you I will share an excerpt with you. So here is what I wrote pertaining to this one here. Will the support of Russia and China help Iran challenge the status quo, not only in the Persian Gulf, but also in the greater Middle East? How will the main allies of the United States in the region, like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, etc., react to Iran's growing influence? These questions are at the heart of US foreign policy moving forward. The grandiose plans that the Washington establishment made during the Shah era faded the moment he was overthrown. That's exactly what I argued back then. In other words, US policy that used to have, it's not going to be holding anymore because the geopolitical landscape has shifted, and with the US not at the heart of it, because as a matter of fact, has shifted not to the liking of the United States. It's a reality. So that was the first one. Now, the second point in all this, remember, I told you all this comes on the heels of three main things. The first one was Russia. And the second one has to do with Steve Wikov, the guy who is leading the negotiations. I have a shared picture with you here, and I give credit to Reuters for this. This is Steve Wikov. Now, for Steve, you know, I don't know how much the guy deals with real estate and all that stuff. Diplomacy is a different ball game altogether. So it won't matter. Here is the thing with what happened with Steve Wikov now. Now he appears sort of to accept a cap on the uranium enrichment. That's what he said first. Suddenly he flipped because there is a post. I wish I didn't get it. I'm sorry, guys, but I am aware of it. There is a post on X, on Twitter, on social media, that he disclosed that now Iran has to give up all uranium enrichment. So makes you just wonder how you flip from, you go from accepting a cap on Iran's uranium enrichment to giving up all. Iran has to give up all its uranium enrichment. So to me, it became like Wikov took about face. Yeah. And that's, to me, right there, it gives the Iranian sort of a pause into, this is why we are not going to negotiate directly with the Americans, because you don't want to give the Americans that opportunity. And second, we're going to have to move carefully. And that's exactly what the Iranians are doing. So, because here is the thing that Wikov didn't think about. For Iran, civilian nuclear, the Iran enrichment of uranium, which is, by the way, it's a sovereign right, because Iran is part of the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty Organization. So they have the right. And that's, once again, the shift in possession sort of, I'm sure Iranians will look at it like, wait a minute, how do we interpret this? As an insult? As a dictation? That the Americans dictating to us to hold all enrichment uranium? What happened to our sovereignty? So, and that's, to me, it's not a good sign for what lies ahead, in my opinion. So, and this is, again, what's going to make Iranian pause and reflect. And once again, I need you to remember, this is not the Americans speaking. This is the Americans speaking on behalf of Israel. You know, it's not a secret, guys. Everybody knows it. So, and the third element, it has to do with the trip by this guy to Iran. Now, who is this guy? This is the Saudi defense minister. His name is Prince Khaled bin Salman Al Saud. Has no clue in the military whatsoever. And the guy was born in 1988. You know, you got the idea. So, by the way, I give credit to the for that picture to the Iranian Army office. That's their picture. So, now, this guy, he's the grandson of the founder of Saudi Arabia, King Abdulaziz, and he is the 10th child and the 9th son of King Salman. He's the younger brother of MBS. But here is the shocking thing about this guy. The CIA, in CIA's leaks assessment, and it's, again, not classified, Prince Khaled, this guy you are looking at here, right here, this guy, he was involved in the assassination of this guy. You guys know who this is? Can anybody type in the chat box who this person is? Let me see. I know it takes a while to show up here. Oh, Idris. Sorry, where are you? Idris Williams. You got it. That's Jamal Khashoggi. That is correct. That is correct. So it's Jamal Khashoggi. So, and instructing Khashoggi to go to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, where Khashoggi was subsequently strangled and dismembered. So, but anyway, this is not the point. My point into this, you have to understand this dynamics as to what's going on, because the Saudis were very concerned. Because remember, if it weren't for China, the Saudis were, you know, because remember, Saudi Arabia, and again, when I wrote the Saudi book, I detailed all this. As a matter of fact, guys, I am even thinking of doing a show for you about this. Would you like me to do this? Yes or no? Would you like me to provide you my own analysis about the Saudi defense minister visit to Iran only a day and a half prior to the US-Iran negotiations in Rome, Italy? So just if you will be kind and just answer in the chat box, and I will take it up from there. So here's what I need you to know. Saudi Arabia, along with other Gulf states, Arab states, that is, the useless ones anyway, all of them, have been wary of getting embroiled in Iran's conflict with Israel and the United States. Well, of course, they are concerned. Why? They're concerned because they know they're going to become a target if any attack is launched from their soil, because Iran made it clear, and all Iran's missiles are within reach. And even the Patriot missile system, the defense one that the Saudis have, was useless against the Houthis. This is why the Saudis, along with Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, you name it, they are useless. Jordan, all of them. I mean, tell me right now if any of them has the gut to take stand regarding what's going on in Gaza. None. No, it's just Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, you name it. You name it. So here is what happened. Last year, of course, Iran exchanged strikes with Israel. You'll remember, and I covered this one for you. So what happened is that the Arab states in the region, the Gulf, have expressed concern to the US about a potential attack by Israel on Iranian oil facilities. Yeah, like they care for Iran. No. They care about the revenues for their survival, for the survival of the monarchies. Remember, those countries in the Gulf, whatever, they're controlling the resources. The citizens are not having much of that. Yeah, they do give them a stipend, whatever, but that's like a crumbs. That's what they do. So they were concerned about the survival of the monarchies, because if unemployment goes out of control, if poverty starts to become the norm, people is going to say, we're done with this monarchy here. That's why those Gulf Arab countries expressed their concern to the US, so the US can pressure Israel. But this has nothing to do. I read some analysis that says, oh, the Arab states were, the Gulf Arab states were concerned about economic and environmental impact. No, that's BS. They care less for that. They worry about their survival. Because here is the thing, because Iran publicly warned that any party seen as aiding or helping Israel will be treated as aggressor, and rightly so. Because I'm going to share a map with you if I have it. I think I do. And just an overview, guys. Just an overview. Take a look here. Just look at here. For Israel to go to attack Iran, he has to go through some airspace of some Arab countries. You have Iraq, you have Saudi Arabia, you have Jordan, then you have the Gulf. This is what it's all about. The Saudis' defense minister trip to Iran ain't about relationship, strengthening, whatever. No. They are concerned, and they wanted to test the water to see how far Iran is willing to go. And of course, Iran's not going to disclose that. It will be a mistake if you trust the Saudis. That would be a mistake. So this is what's happening. Now, there is one other point that you need to know, and this one has to do with the disaster and the division that exists inside Israel with all this. Because remember, Israel is vehemently opposing any talks between the Americans and the Iranians, because Israel wants to remain the only power with the nukes in the Middle East or West Asia. And once again, I think Iran should have moved forward years ago and declare whatever, and that's it. You will see. We will not dare to threaten them. The same arguments I make about North Korea. So, and here is what's concerning about Israel. What's concerning about it is that the head of and I'm not going to get into the weeds of it because their system is different. For example, their Supreme Court. Now, their Supreme Court is refusing the dismissal of the head of the Shabak. His name is Barr. I think I have a picture of his. You need to understand this dynamics, guys, because it will make more sense to you. I think I have a picture. No, I don't. Sorry, guys. The head of Shabak. Anyway, he is now, no, the Supreme Court said the government cannot dismiss the guy. And even now, you have Lipid. Lipid is one who was in the government. He is now arguing publicly that Israel is headed for a disaster. And soon you're going to be seeing political assassinations are coming. Because there is a mass division that exists inside Israel. And all this plays a role into why the Americans wants to flip the venue of the negotiations with Iran regarding the nuclear program into Europe. Because if we do in Europe, we have more control over the outcome that way. So, and this is again where that classified report has came out as far as the on April 17th, just like a few days ago, why Mr. Trump blocked Israeli plan to strike Iran nuclear sites. They won't be able to go because remember, and I disclosed this before, Israel already tried to target certain, and they did some, but not the facilities. They couldn't go deeper inside. Why? It's because the Iran defense missile systems and also the radars, because the Israelis couldn't jam the communications for the Iranians. So Israel knew not to go deeper. Yeah, they went out some, and I confirmed this with someone I know. But it was nothing. So that's why Iranians didn't even talk much about it. So when Israel said, oh, we're going to go, or even Trump said, I have blocked Israel plan to strike Iran's nuclear sites, those are very, very deep in the mountains. And it's not going to be easy to get into. It's not going to be easy to get into. So that's the way I see it. Because here is the reason why. And I'm going to share a picture with you of a specific missile. This one here, and this is, by the way, this is a new type in its development. Iran already had some of this. What you're looking at what's called Sayyad 3. That's an Arabic word for the English translation is hunter. Sayyad 3. And this is one of the two new air defense systems for Iran. So Israel is aware, and they are, by the way, Sayyad 1, Sayyad 2, Sayyad 3. They even have Sayyad 4. I looked it up and read up a little bit on it. Let me see a picture. Yes, I do have it. And this one has two main things to it. More range, meaning distance, and the other tank has to do with the maneuverability. That's what it is. Take a look here, guys. Right there. So Iran already developed all this. So, and let alone the radar systems are very, very, very strong. So this is why, then no matter what you hear, it just don't fall for it. That's the reason why I wanted to do this for you guys. I'm going to put a link for you guys. You can read up on this later on, should you decide to do so. And again, because of the community, I am very concerned as to when you start. I read and I watch and I hear this. When things don't make any sense, it becomes my responsibility to ensure that our community at least have the facts. And of course, as I always say, guys, that's my rule. You reach your own conclusion. You might disagree with me, and that's fine. And of course, I welcome that, because that's how we develop ideas. That's how we exchange. That's how we learn. You don't have to agree with me, of course. So now, we're not talking only about the division that exists in Israel. We're talking about divisions that exist in American government. And what am I referring to? I am referring to two individuals right here, two neocons. Oh, I have a picture of the head of the Shabak right here. I knew I did. This is Ronan Bar. So he's still in his possession. So and it will be a mistake of Netanyahu to dismiss him, because security services are so. But anyway, The division that exists in the United States, we do have division also. And it's very, very important. Why? Because you have two individuals. It's one of them. Wait, I thought I had the picture. Let me see. I'm looking to see if I kept the picture. Maybe I didn't. No, I didn't. My apologies, guys. Anyway, two individuals. Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, and Rubio, the Secretary of State. Two neocons, two warmongers that they are pushing towards a war with Iran. You know, the president, Donald Trump, that's Donald Trump. So, but you have to understand this reality. So given this division that exists within the U.S. national security team, and especially with these two, Rubio and Mike Waltz, over how to deal with Iran, and prevent it from acquiring nuclear weapons, and so and you start to think in terms of where this is moving forward. That's why the Iranians will have to think twice about how much can we even deal with the Americans, and what makes you even certain that by the time you reach a deal with the Americans, only next 2 years or 3, the next president will turn it over. This is one of the flaws of our systems. We can hold our end of the bargain. And that's, again, why I am convinced moving forward in these talks, it's going to be in one of those atmospheres of optimism and sort of pessimism or cautionary reactions and so forth. Because that's the only way I see it. You can't think and, I mean, it will even, in my opinion, this will reach a point where sort of it will collapse on its own. Because we put in now more restrictions on the Iranians that what makes us think they're going to agree? We haven't succeeded in bringing them down since the revolution. What makes us think we're going to succeed today? Tremor, rhetoric, and all that stuff is not going to cut it. Iran today is not Iran of 30 years. The same arguments I make about China. China's today is not China's of 20 years ago. And that's why Mr. Trump was shocked as to how China has responded to his tariffs policies. He didn't see that coming. And again, that's an indication of the imminent collapse of the empire. It pains me to say this is my country. Do I wish my country will develop and all that? Yes, I do, because we can't deny this. But again, I will not shy away from criticizing when my country does wrong, because that is the right thing to do. You put your emotions aside. That's like differentiating between what's right and what's wrong. You can be cherry picking only when it suits you. You can't turn blind eye on this and say, oh, it's only this. If you are to present an argument, an analysis, an objective one, you provide both sides of the argument and let people decide. So, and of course, I am more now realizing maybe Mr. Trump's rhetoric for the we're going to have to pressure hard if you don't come to the negotiating table, whatever, turns out to be this pressure on Iran didn't work. Because one of the demands was, we want to have a direct talks, Iran saying no. And now I will be keeping my eyes open as to whether the talks is going to go back to Oman or not. And I bet you if Iran ever agree to changing the venue, then they are setting themselves for bad outcome. Because you don't want to negotiate with the Americans from a weak position. This is where China is, because China now is in a strong position. So it doesn't need. So that's why Mr. Trump is kind of waiting on a phone call from Mr. Xi. I don't think so it will ever happen. Ain't gonna happen. Keep waiting, because you didn't think through of your decisions, and it's affecting an entire country. This is not about ego. This is not about, because what he was thinking is about his image per se, disregarding the welfare of the entire country. Anyway, now there is one more point, two more points I need to talk about this, and I'll end it here. So, as I mentioned, the Vice President J.D. Vance visited Rome. He was in Rome on the eve of the talks between Iran. What would you go to Rome for? To give them the talking points? So, and that is exactly why you need to start to think about how much the Washington wants to influence the course of these talks by now trying to push the narrative towards having European country holds the negotiations. Iran will be making a grave mistake if they ever agree to this. And the war, yes, they're gonna. Iran is ready for it. Iran is prepared, and the consequences for us also is not gonna be nice, and the consequences for the regional countries, it's not gonna be pretty. So, and here is the thing that media didn't disclose openly, is that Oman, the capital I'm sorry, Muscat, which is the capital of Oman. Oman rejected the American demand for media coverage. Yeah. During the first round, Oman didn't agree. The Americans tried to pressure Oman because, the coverage, the media, misleading stuff. This is, again, why I decided to do this, because it's it's our community. I got to protect to make sure you are not being misled into a different outcome when you hear about the topic. Because one thing you need to understand, that whatever, you need to pay close attention to these negotiations and so forth, because the outcome will impact you one way or another. I hope it never gets to a war. And this is, again, why we wanted to change the venue, because we couldn't influence the publicity of it. That's why I said, when they in the West saying, oh, the negotiations were constructive and positive, I'll take a step back and think twice about that. I know better. So, and this is where, when the Americans are pressing for direct talks while the Iranians saying, no, we're going to maintain the indirect talks. That's how. And because Iran believes in Oman's neutrality. And that in itself has sort of irritated the Americans. We didn't like it, because we wanted now to change the playing field, per se. I mean, we are not even talking now about replacing the mediators. No. Who are we? And I'm going to bring you to my last point, and this one has to do with, because remember, Iran's fear stems from experience. What am I referring to here? I am referring to 2015, when the US security agencies and others were spying on the Iranian delegations regarding the nuclear agreement. So I have a picture here of what's his name, former president, and I give credit to Behruz Mehri. That's his picture, for Hassan Rouhani, because remember, it was during Hassan Rouhani when the JCPOA was reached. We were spying on the Iranian delegations, and and of course, we all know the NSA, the National Security Agency. I'm sure they are listening to what I'm saying here, but again, I'm not saying something that is not out there. Spying on foreign leaders, like the Iranian former president Hassan Rouhani, and that was even during the UN General Assembly in New York. So as a matter of fact, I'm aware of a top secret document, but again, it's declassified, but it was classified back then. So the top secret report on a previous NSA operation against Iran's UN delegation illustrated just how extensive this electronic surveillance can be. So, and this document, by the way, was obtained by another news outlet here in the US. And it showed that the US bugged the hotel rooms and phones of the Iranian president at that time, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, and his entire delegation of 143 members back in 2007. I mean, you all know we spied on Angela Merkel. We were listening to her cell phone. This is an ally. So, yeah, Israelis do it for the Americans. When some of us used to travel to Israel, those hotel rooms were bugged and all that stuff. That's just nothing. And I disclosed this in my when I did my presentations. Of course, the unclassified side of that. So I usually, because sometimes I give presentations to private audiences here. So here's a link to my speaking, and I did it for military, high-ranking military officials. Sometimes we disclose, but not the classified side, because I'm bound by the law. Simple as that. So we leave it at that. So, and now this is where you start to realize you take both the divisions that exist in Israel, the divisions that exist in the US. And interesting enough is that in the US is the war hawks like Rubio. Rubio, if you look at his career, how he got to where he is, who was funding him in Congress, in the Senate, whatever. He was the AIPAC. So, and this is where you are seeing now, as a matter of fact, the change to Washington's position regarding now the Steve Wikov saying Iran has to dismantle all its nuclear program and all that. This one has to do with a meeting between Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, his name is Ron Dinner, and the Mossad director, his name is David Bernia. They met with the US envoy Wikov just a day before his meeting in Rome. And where did he meet? They didn't meet in Italy. They met in Paris. So, once again, and this is where you have to understand. I couldn't wait to do this for you guys, because you need to understand all this, what's going on. And even I'll go as far as having even a former Secretary of State. The guy was never fit for that position. Pompeo, right here. And I wrote some articles about him back then. So even for him, it was kind of didn't make sense. And here is what Pompeo is saying. And I will provide you the link. Actually, I'm going to put the link for you guys. You can read it later on, should you decide to do so. Here is what Pompeo is saying. Pompeo is saying that the Trump administration, sort of the negotiations with Iran, is the weakest strategic point in decades. And the president hands could not be stronger. So therefore, this is again what Pompeo is saying. Therefore, an agreement that permits Iran, this is his word, and I'm quoting here, permit Iran to continue with its current nuclear rate of development is not a deal worth making, according to the former CIA director. Instead, similarly to what he shared in 2018, Pompeo argued a new accord with Tehran should be based on three main conditions. Just take a listen at this. Iran destroying all uranium enrichment sites. 2, stop providing political, military, and financial support to its proxies. And 3, striking a peace deal with its Gulf Arab neighbors, along with doing away with the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps. End of quote. Wishful thinking, if I may add, because what makes him think that Iran is going to even agree to any of this, let alone what is the role of Pompeo into all this to begin with? Disaster policies that he pursued back then. So that's why I don't quite understand where he is moving forward. So, and I'm going to end this, guys, with an excerpt from my Iran book. just to put once again things in perspective. That is what I wrote back then. In the last 2 or 3 decades, the national conversation centered on the path, the direction of US foreign policy. Questions emerged, for instance, as to where the US was headed. Was there a foreign policy strategy in place? How was the US going to lead in a chaotic, soon to be multipolar world? And how was the United States going to deal with countries that not only do not share its vision, but are also armed with nuclear weapons? My reference is in that final question is to Iran. US-Iranian relations have been marked by US culpability, particularly regarding the CIA's role and MI6 in the overthrow of Mossadegh. Yet, this narrative continues even today to shape policies in both countries and influence US-Iranian relations in a way that allow each country to write the narrative that serves its interests and appeals to its populace. And that's what I wrote back then. So, anyway, that's all I have to share with you. I hope you find it very, very interesting. Let me say thank you to some of our great supporters. I'll start with Rafael Gond, as always, man. Truly appreciate your support. The joint exercise between China and Egypt is the beginning of the establishment of a free and independent Palestine state. Yeah, except, Rafael, I am here to tell you, you can't trust the Egyptians either. You can't. If you only know how the former head of the intelligence division, Amr Moussa, used to deal with the Israeli Mossad and all that at the expense of the Palestinians. But yeah, that could be a possibility. France is already announced that in the summer they might be considering declaration of Palestinian state. We'll see what France does. So thank you so much for your super sticker. Yeah. Arimov, much appreciate you. For Iran to negotiate is to admit the Islamic Revolution to genocide Jews and conquer the world failed. They will never admit Islamic ideology failed. Appreciate your super sticker. However, I have to disagree with you on one aspect. And this one has to do with the Islamic ideology, because there was this argument that Iran, after the revolution, was aimed at dominating the Muslim world. Iran had no interest in that, because how do you expect over 170 million, give or take, a million Shia in a population of 1.4 to 1.6 billion Muslim, including the Sunnis? You know, it just doesn't make any sense. Second, most Arab countries will not accept it anyway. So in my argument back then, I made the argument, if you get a chance to read my Iran book, you will find out there that I disclosed that Iran has no, at least the research that I conducted didn't give me any indications. Once again, thank you very much, Arimov. Truly appreciate your support. Once again, Rafael, truly appreciate you. There's not going to be a war with Iran. The hydrogen bomb test yesterday in China and Russia tells us, I'm aware of the Chinese testing the hydrogen bomb. That's very, very interesting. You have to know also that there is another one that exists in the region in West Asia. Can't disclose the locations of where that is, but I see your point. I see your point. There are those who are saying, oh, the US is going to attack Iran with, I didn't buy that argument. I didn't buy that argument. You know, to me, what the administration is doing right now, it gives me an idea that they know that this is not a cakewalk. Like I always say, Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not Syria. And we will not be able to defeat Iran anyway. Look, we haven't even defeated the Houthis. What makes us think? Francis Tango, as always, truly appreciate your support. What will BRICS countries do with tariffs, Dr. O? It will be very interesting, because I'm going to have a conversation on Wednesday, I think at 7 p.m. Not on this channel. I was invited to another channel to do. They want me to talk about BRICS moving forward. So BRICS, I mean, beside India, I don't know. India is the weak. Get rid of India and strengthen BRICS. But even with that, I'm starting now to sense BRICS might not have what it takes to push back hard against Western hegemony, because China cannot do it by itself. China has to think of its own people, its own country. Why should they carry the weight for the entire BRICS? Because remember, there are about 40 countries wants to join BRICS. I say, hold on that. Hold on that. Till BRICS strengthen its structure, because the structure of BRICS is very, very not strong enough. That will gives it more strength on the global stage. Till they do that, then we'll have a different conversation. So once again, Francis Tango, thank you so much for your super sticker. And the last person is Army with Harmony. Much appreciate. Vince is blind to the poor in his own backyard. Yeah, absolutely correct. Army with Harmony, couldn't agree more with your assertion. And I mean, I look at it just right here in America with infrastructure and where things are, and poverty, and you name it, education. Students aren't learning anything here in this country anymore. And gives me a pause. Why are we going and venturing? I mean, Trump misled the population, but again, they voted for him. They're going to have to live with those consequences, and that's their deal. So they're going to have to decide how they move forward with that. So. Okay, let me once again appreciate you all, guys. Thank you for being here. Remember to support the channel for my upcoming trip to Asia. Here is the link. I would greatly appreciate that, and I'm still planning on going there sometime in August. So once again, I apologize because I didn't do the update for the funding. So I'll show you what everything is, and we'll move forward with that. All right, guys, please make sure to hit the like button and share this with everyone else. And as always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.